What happens when an entire patrol vanishes without a shot fired, without radio chatter, without a single witness to their disappearance? How does silence become more terrifying than gunfire? In the frozen forests of eastern Belgium, 3 days after Christmas 1944, those questions haunted Lieutenant James Brennan as he stared at the map coordinates where 6 of his men should have been. The reconnaissance platoon of the 99th Infantry Division had been operating in this sector for 11 days, probing German positions in the aftermath of the Ardennes counteroffensive. Their mission was straightforward: identify enemy movements, locate supply routes, and report back without engaging unless absolutely necessary. Standard reconnaissance doctrine that had kept them alive through some of the war's bloodiest weeks. But now, Corporal Dan Miller's forward patrol, 6 experienced soldiers who knew these woods better than the maps did, had gone silent 16 hours ago. Brennan had sent them to investigate what aerial reconnaissance suggested might be a German staging area near a wooded ravine 2 miles east. Miller's last transmission came at 14:30 hours, reached objective, no contact, investigating further. After that, nothing. No gunfire heard by neighboring units, no flares, no distress signals. 6 men equipped with radios, flares, and protocol simply ceased to exist somewhere in that dense forest corridor. The disappearance violated every pattern Brennan had learned in 2 years of combat. Germans ambushed patrols violently, machine guns, mortars, overwhelming firepower designed to prevent survivors from reporting positions. They didn't make soldiers vanish like ghosts. The silence suggested something more calculated, more dangerous. Either Miller's patrol had walked into a trap so complete they never had time to react, or they'd discovered something the Germans desperately wanted to keep hidden. Sergeant Tom Harker stood beside Brennan at the edge of their defensive perimeter, scanning the tree line through binoculars that showed nothing but snow-covered pines and morning fog. "Could be they went to ground," Harker offered without conviction. "Radio damaged, waiting for dark to move." Both men knew it was wishful thinking. Miller was too experienced to maintain radio silence this long. If he could transmit, he would. Behind them, near the supply cache they'd established in a cluster of dense undergrowth, Rex paced with visible agitation. The German Shepherd had been with the platoon since October, trained specifically for route detection and sabotage identification. Unlike standard scout dogs that focused on immediate threats, Rex had been conditioned to recognize patterns: disturbed earth that might indicate buried explosives, chemical traces from German equipment, even the subtle signs of recent human activity that soldiers missed. He was 3 years old, battle-tested through France and into Belgium, and Brennan had learned to trust the dog's instincts as much as his own scouts' reports. But Rex's current behavior was unusual. The dog kept moving toward the eastern approach, the same direction Miller's patrol had taken, then returning to Harker with low whines that bordered on frustration. His handler, Private First Class Eddie Martinez, tried to settle him with familiar commands, but Rex ignored them. Something out there had captured his attention in a way Martinez had never seen before. "He's been like this since midnight," Martinez reported, frustration evident in his voice. "Won't eat, won't settle. Keeps pulling toward that sector." He gestured east with his free hand while maintaining grip on Rex's lead. "I've checked him for injury, illness, everything. He's physically fine, just fixated." Brennan studied the dog with new interest. Rex had proven reliable in detecting dangers before they became casualties. 2 weeks earlier, the dog had stopped the platoon from entering what looked like an abandoned German position, only for engineers to later discover the entire structure was rigged with explosives. If Rex was reacting to something in the direction Miller had gone, it wasn't random behavior. The lieutenant made a decision that would define the next 48 hours. "We follow up on Miller's last known position. Full combat load, dispersed formation. Martinez, Rex leads, but we maintain tactical control. If he pulls towards something, we investigate cautiously." He paused, meeting the eyes of each man in the assembled squad. "We're not just looking for Miller. We're looking for why Miller disappeared. That distinction matters." They moved out at 08:30 hours under overcast skies that promised more snow before noon. The forest pressed close on both sides of the narrow trail Miller's patrol would have used. evergreens so dense they blocked most ambient light even in daytime. Sound dampened strangely here, as if the trees absorbed noise, creating pockets of silence that made normal conversation feel intrusive. Rex moved at point with Martinez, nose working the cold air, occasionally dropping to sniff the ground where snow had been disturbed. 40 minutes into the movement, Rex stopped abruptly at a location where the trail forked. One path continued east toward Miller's objective. The other, barely visible under fresh snowfall, curved northeast into terrain the platoon had previously classified as low priority. Too quiet, too empty to warrant detailed investigation. Rex turned toward the northeast path, tail rigid, every muscle indicating intensity. Brennan called a halt and moved forward to examine the fork. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Snow covered everything in uniform white, punctuated by tree trunks and exposed rock. But as he studied the northeast path more carefully, details emerged. The snow there wasn't quite as deep as it should be given the previous night's accumulation. Something had compressed it recently, then been partially concealed by additional snowfall. Not animal tracks. The pattern was too regular. Human movement, multiple people, within the last 12 hours. Harker knelt beside what might have been a boot print, using his knife to carefully clear snow from the depression. "German," he said quietly, identifying the distinctive tread pattern. "At least 3, maybe more. Moving northeast, same direction Rex wants to go." He looked up at Brennan. Could be they intercepted Miller. But Rex wasn't following the German tracks with the behavior of a dog pursuing enemy soldiers. His reaction suggested something different, something that triggered his specialized training. Martinez gave the command for detection mode, and Rex immediately began working the trail systematically, pausing every few yards to process information that only his heightened senses could interpret. The dog was following something, but what remained, unclear. They advanced along the northeast path with weapons ready, every man understanding they might be walking into the same trap that claimed Miller's patrol. The forest changed subtly as they progressed. Trees grew denser, spacing irregular, creating natural choke points where ambushes would be devastatingly effective. The ground sloped downward toward what maps indicated was a ravine system, terrain perfect for concealed movement. Rex stopped at a fallen log that had been partially cleared of snow. Brennan spotted it immediately, a listening post recently occupied. Crushed cigarettes, German brand, still showed faint warmth when he tested them with his glove. Food wrappers, flattened areas where soldiers had crouched for extended periods. This position overlooked the main trail Miller would have used, which meant Germans had been watching when the patrol passed. Yet they hadn't engaged. Why? The answer came as Rex led them 50 yards further northeast, where the trail descended sharply into the ravine. There, carefully camouflaged with branches and netting, were vehicle tracks. Recent, heavy, consistent with supply trucks or personnel carriers. The tracks led deeper into the ravine system, disappearing around a bend where natural terrain features would hide them from aerial observation. This wasn't a listening post or forward position. This was something larger, something deliberate. Rex's low growl made Martinez tense. The dog had detected immediate danger. Brennan signaled the platoon to take cover, and within seconds, they'd melted into the surrounding forest, weapons trained on potential approaches. For 3 minutes they waited, barely breathing, while Rex remained rigid with focused attention. Then, faint but unmistakable, came voices. German voices speaking casually about rotation schedules and supply deliveries, a patrol moving through terrain they clearly considered secure. If Miller's 6-man patrol had stumbled onto this hidden route, discovered what the Germans were protecting, their disappearance suddenly made tactical sense. They hadn't been ambushed. They'd been captured, silenced before they could report what they'd found. And whatever lay deeper in this ravine network was important enough that the enemy was willing to risk operating this close to American positions. If this story has pulled you in, if you're wondering what Rex and the platoon will discover in that hidden German corridor, make sure you're subscribed to follow their mission through to the end. Drop a comment with your thoughts on what Miller's patrol might have found, hit that like button, and share this with anyone who appreciates authentic military history brought to life. The next chapters will take you deeper into territory, where one wrong step could mean the difference between exposing enemy secrets and becoming another patrol that simply vanished. The German patrol passed within 30 yards of Brennan's concealed position, 4 soldiers moving with the casual confidence of men who believed this sector belonged to them. They wore winter camouflage over standard Feldgrau, their weapons slung rather than at the ready, talking about a supply convoy expected before nightfall. One complained about the cold, another mentioned something about expanded capacity in the lower positions. They disappeared around the ravine bend, without ever sensing American eyes watching from the forest shadows. Brennan waited 5 full minutes after the voices faded before signaling his men to regroup. Rex remained tense, head turning to track scents the humans couldn't perceive. Martinez kept the dog close, one hand on his collar, ready to muffle any sound if Rex decided to bark. The discovery of active German movement this deep into what should have been contested territory changed everything. This wasn't a fallback route. It was an operational corridor being used regularly enough that patrols walked it without tactical caution. Harker moved up beside Brennan, keeping his voice barely above a whisper. "They're talking about lower positions like there's infrastructure down there. Supply convoys don't run through random ravines unless there's somewhere specific they're going." His eyes tracked the vehicle marks that continued deeper into the ravine system. Miller must have seen something, maybe got too close before he realized what he was looking at. The tactical problem crystallized in Brennan's mind. They needed intelligence on what lay deeper in this corridor, but advancing risked the same fate that claimed Miller's patrol. Retreating to report what little they knew might give the Germans time to relocate or strengthen defenses. The decision balanced mission requirements against survival odds that grew worse with every minute they remained in enemy-controlled terrain. Rex made the decision for him. The dog pulled against Martinez's grip, not frantically but with determination, indicating he detected something specific along the path the German patrol had taken. Martinez looked to Brennan for guidance. The lieutenant considered ordering Rex to stand down, maintaining position until they had better intelligence. But the dog's specialized training was designed precisely for this situation, identifying dangers and routes that human observation missed. "Let him work," Brennan ordered quietly. "But we follow at distance, combat intervals, weapons hot, first sign of prepared defenses. We pull back and call for support." He didn't mention that radio contact this deep in the ravine would be unreliable at best, or that support might take hours to arrive even if they could transmit. Some realities didn't need voicing. They descended into the ravine with Rex leading, the dog moving more cautiously now, pausing frequently to test the air. The terrain grew more complex, with rocky outcroppings and dense undergrowth that provided natural concealment. Snow depth varied dramatically, shallow in some areas where wind had scoured it away, waist-deep in others where it had drifted against obstacles. The vehicle tracks they followed showed signs of regular maintenance, snow cleared repeatedly to keep the route passable. Martinez suddenly froze, yanking Rex to a halt. He pointed silently at the ground 3 feet ahead where snow had been disturbed in a pattern too regular to be natural. Brennan moved forward carefully and brushed away surface snow, revealing wire barely visible against frozen earth. A tripwire, probably connected to mines or an alarm system. Rex had stopped just short of it, nose working the air as if he'd detected the explosive compounds used in German ordnance. They marked the wire's position and moved around it, acutely aware that where one trap existed, others likely waited. The ravine curved sharply, and as they rounded the bend, the terrain opened into something unexpected. A natural amphitheater carved by ancient water flows, perhaps 200 yards across, ringed by steep walls that would make it invisible from above. And occupying that space was German engineering at its most methodical. Camouflaged positions lined the ravine walls, firing steps cut into the frozen earth and reinforced with logs. Supply caches sat beneath waterproof tarps, stacked ammunition crates visible where covering had pulled loose. A communications wire ran along one wall, disappearing into what looked like a command bunker, partially dug into the hillside. Vehicle tracks led to a concealed parking area where the outline of at least 2 trucks showed beneath netting. This wasn't a temporary position. It was a prepared fallback corridor designed to channel German forces through American lines, if the front collapsed. More disturbing was evidence of recent prisoner handling. Near the command bunker, they spotted a small holding area. Fence posts driven into frozen ground, concertina wire strung between them, guard positions at corners. Fresh boot prints from multiple people converged there, including what might have been American boot patterns distinct from German treads. Miller's patrol. They'd been here, probably held in that makeshift cage before being moved elsewhere. Rex growled again, this time with urgency that made Martinez tighten his grip. The dog focused on the command bunker, body language indicating something inside or beyond demanded attention. Brennan studied the position through his rifle scope, searching for movement, guards, any sign of immediate threat. The camp appeared minimally manned, skeleton crew sufficient to maintain security, but not defend against serious assault. That suggested most personnel were elsewhere, possibly rotating positions or conducting patrols. The lieutenant made rapid calculations. They had discovered exactly what command needed to know: a hidden German route, fortified positions, evidence of prisoner captures. But intelligence was worthless if they couldn't deliver it. Advancing further risked capture. Retreating meant abandoning Miller's men if they were still alive somewhere in this complex. And Rex's continued insistence suggested something critical lay ahead that justified the danger. Brennan gathered his squad leaders with hand signals, pulling them into a tight cluster where whispered words wouldn't carry. We document what we can from here, then two options: pull back and report, or push forward to confirm prisoner location. He met each man's eyes in turn. Vote counts. This isn't parade ground. It's life or death for Miller's people and maybe for us. The vote was unanimous. Every man understood that leaving Miller's patrol behind wasn't an option if there was any chance of recovery. Brennan felt grim satisfaction at their courage, even as he calculated the odds stacking against them. 6 men were already missing. If this went wrong, they'd lose another 12. Rex provided their advantage. The dog could detect threats before visual confirmation, giving them seconds that might mean survival. Martinez gave the command for enhanced alert mode, and Rex's entire posture changed, ears forward, nose working constantly, moving with the careful deliberation of an animal that understood stakes beyond its own safety. They approached the command bunker from the western side, using natural depressions and rock formations for cover. The position remained eerily quiet. A single guard stood at the bunker entrance, stamping his feet against cold, rifle slung, smoking a cigarette with the bored expression of someone who expected no trouble. Behind him, the bunker entrance gaped dark, reinforced with timber and camouflage netting that made it nearly invisible from any distance. Harker moved first, years of combat experience making him silent, despite frozen ground that should have crunched underfoot. He closed to within 10 yards before the guard sensed something wrong, head turning, mouth opening to shout. Harker's knife work was efficient and brutal. The guard dropped without sound, body dragged quickly into shadow where it wouldn't be immediately visible. The bunker interior revealed itself slowly as Brennan's eyes adjusted to darkness after bright snow glare outside. The space was larger than expected, dug deep into the hillside with structural supports that spoke of professional engineering. Radio equipment occupied one corner, currently unmanned. Maps covered a makeshift table, marked with German tactical symbols that would have intelligence officers salivating. Supply crates lined walls, and in the back, a doorway led deeper into the hillside. Rex pulled toward that doorway with intensity that made Martinez grunt with effort to control him. Whatever the dog detected lay beyond, through passages that could contain anything from ammunition stores to prison cells. Brennan detailed 2 men to secure the entrance and radio room while he, Harker, Martinez, and Rex advanced deeper into the complex. The passage descended at a shallow angle, walls showing pick marks where German engineers had expanded natural cave formations into usable space. Electric lights hung at intervals, powered by a generator they could hear rumbling somewhere ahead. The air grew warmer as they descended, suggesting the complex was heated, another sign of permanent rather than temporary occupation. Side chambers appeared at irregular intervals. The first contained fuel drums and vehicle parts. The second held medical supplies organized with typical German efficiency. The third made Brennan's chest tighten. Prisoner effects, American uniforms, dog tags, weapons, all sorted and cataloged. He recognized Miller's jacket by the distinctive tear in the shoulder from barbed wire weeks earlier. His men had been here, stripped of equipment, processed like cargo. Rex whined low and urgent, pulling Martinez toward a fourth chamber that had been fitted with a heavy door. Through the small observation port, Brennan could see what he'd both hoped and feared to find. 6 men in American uniforms sitting against walls, hands bound, guarded by 2 German soldiers who looked equally cold and miserable. Miller was among them, face bruised but alive, eyes alert despite obvious exhaustion. The tactical problem was immediate and complex. They were outnumbered in a confined space with unknown additional enemy forces potentially nearby. Direct assault risked prisoner casualties and would certainly alert the entire corridor. But they couldn't leave without attempting rescue. Military ethics aside, these men possessed intelligence about German dispositions that headquarters desperately needed. Harker assessed the situation with professional detachment. Door opens inward. Guards are positioned to watch prisoners, not expecting attack from the corridor. If we move fast and precise, we can neutralize them before they react. But extraction is the problem. 6 prisoners with bound hands, moving through that passage and back up the ravine with German patrols possibly in pursuit. Brennan made the decision that would define whether they became heroes or statistics. We take the guards silently, cut the prisoners loose, arm them with captured weapons, and move as a combat unit rather than escort detail. Speed and aggression. We punch through anything between here and American lines, because stopping means dying. Rex suddenly stiffened, head turning back toward the entrance they'd come through. Martinez felt the tension through the lead and signaled urgently to Brennan. The dog had detected something, more Germans, approaching from the direction they'd entered. The corridor was about to become a trap, with Americans caught between prisoner room and incoming enemy. Time collapsed into immediate action. Brennan ordered Harker to breach the prisoner room, while he positioned the others to delay whoever was coming down that passage. They had perhaps 60 seconds before discovery, maybe less. Every moment of training, every combat experience, compressed into split-second decisions that would determine whether 12 Americans saw another dawn. Harker moved to the door, testing the handle carefully. Locked, but the mechanism looked standard, something a well-placed kick could breach. He positioned himself, counted silently to 3 using fingers visible to Brennan, then drove his boot into the wood beside the lock. The door crashed inward, Harker following with rifle up, shouting commands in German to confuse the guards for the critical second he needed. Both guards reached for weapons, but Harker and the soldier behind him fired first, the enclosed space making gunshots thunderously loud, sound echoing down stone passages in waves that would certainly alert anyone within hundreds of yards. The prisoners reacted instantly. Miller, rolling toward the nearest guard's dropped weapon despite bound hands, using it as a club when he couldn't work the trigger. In the corridor, Brennan heard voices approaching rapidly. German commands snapped with military precision. They'd been discovered. No time for subtlety now. He positioned his men at the junction where passages met, creating a hasty defensive position using the natural bottleneck. Rex crouched beside Martinez, hackles raised, ready to warn of additional approaches they might not hear over their own breathing and heartbeat thunder. The first Germans around the corner ran into disciplined American fire, 3 men dropping before they understood what was happening. The survivors pulled back, shouting warnings that would bring reinforcements. Brennan knew they had minutes at most before this turned into a siege they couldn't win. Behind him, he heard Harker cutting prisoners loose, Miller's voice hoarse but determined as he organized freed men into a fighting retreat. They had what they came for, prisoners recovered, intelligence about German positions confirmed, evidence of the hidden corridor documented. Now came the hardest part, getting out alive with German forces converging from multiple directions, time running out, and Rex their only advantage in terrain that could kill them as surely as enemy bullets. Miller grabbed the fallen German's rifle and checked the chamber with hands still numb from rope bindings. His 5 men did likewise, stripping ammunition and grenades from the dead guards with efficiency born from desperate need. They were weak from captivity, faces hollow with hunger and cold, but their eyes showed the fierce determination of soldiers given unexpected second chances. Brennan made rapid assignments as gunfire echoed through stone passages. Miller, your men take rear guard with Harker. We move fast toward the entrance. No stopping for wounded we can't carry. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. Questions? None came. Every man understood the mathematics of their situation. 12 Americans against an unknown number of Germans in terrain the enemy controlled completely. Rex led the breakout, Martinez keeping him on a short lead to prevent the dog from ranging too far ahead. They moved in a tactical column up the passage they'd descended, weapons pointed at every shadow, every side chamber that might conceal ambush. Behind them, pursuing Germans shouted coordinates and warnings, their voices growing closer despite the Americans' speed. The radio room appeared ahead, still secured by the 2 soldiers Brennan had left there. One reported grimly that he'd heard vehicle engines starting outside, suggesting German reinforcements were mobilizing faster than hoped. The maps and documents they'd planned to photograph would have to be abandoned. Survival trumped intelligence gathering when the choice became binary. They burst from the bunker entrance into afternoon light that seemed blindingly bright after underground darkness. The ravine floor that had been quiet earlier now showed activity, soldiers emerging from concealed positions. A truck grinding up the access road, shouts of alarm echoing off stone walls. Brennan's platoon was caught in the open with minimal cover, and Germans approaching from 3 directions. Rex barked urgently, pulling Martinez toward the western wall where the ravine rose steeply but offered a route out of the killing ground below. It wasn't the path they'd entered by, which was now blocked by German forces, but a game trail or erosion channel that cut through the stone in a series of natural steps. Climbing it while under fire would be suicidal in doctrine, but their only option in practice. Harker organized suppressing fire, 3 men with automatic weapons laying down disciplined bursts that forced Germans to seek cover rather than advance. The rest scrambled toward Rex's indicated route, boots slipping on ice-covered rocks, hands grabbing at frozen vegetation for purchase. Miller's weakened men struggled worst, their legs barely able to support their own weight after days of minimal food and no exercise. German machine gun fire tore into the ravine wall beside them, stone chips exploding in stinging clouds that drew blood from exposed skin. One of Miller's men, Private Carson, 19 years old from Michigan, took rounds in the shoulder and chest, his body tumbling backward down the slope they'd just climbed. Martinez reached for him instinctively, but Brennan pulled him back. Carson was already dead, eyes vacant, and retrieving his body meant losing more men to the same machine gun. They kept climbing, leaving Carson behind with silent promises to recover him later if they survived. The ravine rim appeared above them, tree line offering concealment if they could reach it before German fire found more targets. Rex scrambled ahead, somehow finding footholds where humans saw only smooth stone, then barking encouragement from above as if urging slower pack members to hurry. Brennan reached the rim and immediately established a defensive position, pulling men up the final stretch while providing covering fire for those still climbing. A German grenade arced toward them, tumbling through the air with lazy inevitability. Harker batted it away with his rifle stock, the explosive detonating in midair with a flash and concussion that left ears ringing but caused no casualties. The last man cleared the rim as German soldiers reached the base of the trail and began their own ascent. Brennan didn't waste ammunition trying to hit climbers in good cover. Instead, he ordered immediate withdrawal into the forest, trusting speed and Rex's route finding to put distance between them and pursuit before the enemy could organize a proper chase. They ran through forest that seemed darker than before, shadows lengthening as afternoon progressed toward evening. Rex maintained the lead, choosing paths that avoided obvious ambush sites and areas where snow depth would slow their movement. The dog's tactical awareness seemed almost supernatural, though Martinez knew it was simply superior senses processing environmental information humans couldn't detect. Behind them, German voices coordinated pursuit. Dogs barked, enemy tracking animals that would follow their scent trail with the same determination Rex showed in detection. The Americans were leaving obvious tracks in snow, bleeding from a dozen minor wounds, and slowing as exhaustion claimed the last reserves of adrenaline-fueled strength. Miller stumbled and nearly fell, caught by one of his men who was barely stronger. Brennan saw their condition and knew they couldn't maintain this pace. The Germans would run them down within the hour unless something changed. He needed a force multiplier, some advantage that would offset superior enemy numbers and fresher legs. Rex provided it by stopping abruptly at a frozen stream that cut across their path. The dog refused to cross despite Martinez's commands, instead pacing the bank and whining with that specific tone that indicated detected danger. Brennan studied the stream carefully and spotted what had alarmed Rex: disturbed snow patterns suggesting mines planted along the opposite bank, probably German defensive measures to protect their corridor from exactly this kind of intrusion. A minefield meant danger but also opportunity. If they could navigate through it using Rex's detection abilities, their pursuers might blunder into the same traps. Brennan made the decision quickly, ordering Martinez to let Rex work the crossing while the rest provided security. Every second they delayed gave Germans time to close distance, but rushing into mines guaranteed casualties they couldn't afford. Rex moved methodically along the stream bank, testing areas with his nose before indicating safe crossing points with posture changes Martinez had learned to read. They forded in single file, stepping exactly where Rex indicated, water-soaking boots and freezing instantly in air that had dropped below zero as the sun descended. Behind them, pursuit sounds grew closer, Germans crashing through undergrowth with the confidence of hunters who believed their prey was cornered. The last American crossed as the first German appeared at the stream's edge. Brennan's men were already in firing positions, weapons aimed at the kill zone they'd just vacated. The Germans saw Americans across the stream and charged forward without the caution that might have saved them. 3 men stepped on mines, the explosions brutally loud in frozen air, bodies thrown by the blasts into positions that made clear survival was impossible. The remaining Germans pulled back in disorder, pursuit temporarily broken by sudden casualties and the realization that the terrain they'd considered secure contained lethal surprises. Brennan used the confusion to push his men deeper into the forest, knowing this respite was temporary, but grateful for any minutes it bought them. Darkness fell completely as they reached a position Brennan recognized from maps, less than a mile from American lines, if those lines hadn't shifted in the chaos of recent fighting. Rex had led them through impossible terrain, around enemy patrols, across minefields, and out of what should have been an inescapable trap. Now came the final test. Reaching friendly forces before German pursuit reorganized or before exposure claimed the weakened prisoners who could barely walk. The forest thinned as they approached what maps indicated was American-held territory, but Brennan had learned that maps reflected yesterday's reality, in a war where front lines shifted hourly. The absence of German pursuit for the last 20 minutes felt less like victory and more like the eye of a storm. Rex maintained alertness despite exhaustion visible in the dog's gait, limping slightly on his right foreleg from the rocky descent out of the ravine. Miller's condition worried Brennan most. The corporal moved through sheer willpower, face gray with exhaustion, favoring ribs that were probably cracked from interrogation. His remaining 4 men were barely better, stumbling over routes and terrain features they would have navigated easily when fresh. If they encountered German forces now, the group lacked strength for sustained combat. Harker moved up beside Brennan, voice low. "We're making too much noise. Exhausted men can't maintain stealth. If there's a German position between us and our lines, they'll hear us coming." He didn't need to state the obvious conclusion, that after everything they'd survived, they might still die within sight of safety. Rex solved the immediate problem by finding a depression in the forest floor, a natural shelter formed by fallen trees and dense undergrowth. Martinez signaled the discovery, and Brennan ordered a brief halt, knowing rest was necessary despite the risk. Men collapsed where they stood, some falling asleep instantly despite frozen ground and danger. Brennan posted sentries and allowed 10 minutes of recuperation that might mean the difference between reaching friendly lines and collapsing short of salvation. During the halt, Miller briefed Brennan on what his patrol had discovered before capture. The German corridor wasn't just a fallback route. It was part of a larger network designed to allow rapid repositioning of forces behind American lines. Intelligence officers had suspected something like this existed, but lacked confirmation. Miller's information, combined with what Brennan's platoon had documented, could reshape how Division planned its defensive strategy. But that intelligence was worthless if they couldn't deliver it. Brennan checked his map against terrain features visible in the last twilight. They were perhaps 3/4 of a mile from where American positions should be, but should be meant nothing in fluid combat. He needed confirmation before leading exhausted men toward coordinates that might now be occupied by Germans who'd circled ahead to cut off their escape. Rex made that decision unnecessary. The dog's head lifted, ears swiveling toward the northwest, tail beginning a slow wag that Martinez had learned meant friendly forces detected. Dogs could distinguish between American and German soldiers by scent, different rations, different soap, different tobacco, and Rex's posture indicated he'd picked up the specific odor combination of American troops. They moved toward Rex's indicated direction, every man alert despite exhaustion. The forest opened onto a cleared field, perhaps 200 yards across, with a tree line beyond that showed signs of defensive preparation. Foxholes, wire, firing positions. American positions, still held, close enough that Brennan could see the outline of helmets against darkening sky. The challenge was crossing that open ground without being shot by nervous sentries who'd learned to fire first at anything moving after dark. Brennan ordered his men to remove their helmets, waving them overhead while calling out unit identification and password from 3 days earlier. The response came after agonizing seconds, a challenge shouted in clear American accent, demanding today's countersign that Brennan didn't have because he'd been out of contact since before it changed. He made the calculation that honesty was safer than attempting to guess. Lieutenant Brennan, reconnaissance platoon, been behind German lines for 36 hours. I don't have current countersign, but I've got 6 recovered prisoners and intelligence that division needs immediately. His voice carried across the field, hoping whoever commanded that line had enough experience to recognize genuine Americans from German infiltrators. The response came in the form of an officer emerging from the tree line, approaching to within 50 yards with weapon ready but not aimed. Brennan, they reported your platoon missing, possible casualties. Who'd you rescue? The voice belonged to Captain Morrison, Battalion S2, someone Brennan had worked with before. Miller's forward patrol, sir. 6 men went missing 2 days ago. We found where they were being held. Brennan gestured to the exhausted group behind him. We've also got critical intelligence on German positions and a hidden corridor system they're using for resupply and repositioning. Morrison studied them for a moment longer, then signaled for his men to hold fire. Come in slowly, weapons slung. Anyone moves wrong, we drop you all and sort it out afterward. Understood? It was the reception Brennan expected. Professional paranoia that kept defenders alive when Germans regularly used captured uniforms for infiltration. They crossed the open ground with deliberate slowness, hands visible, weapons clearly slung. Rex trotted beside Martinez, tail wagging more confidently now that friendly soldiers were close. As they reached the defensive line, other Americans emerged from positions to help support Miller's weakened men, medics rushing forward with blankets and canteens. Brennan reported directly to Morrison while his platoon received initial treatment. The captain's expression grew increasingly serious as details emerged: the extent of German fortifications, the prisoner-holding facilities, the evidence of regular supply convoy operations. This wasn't tactical information. It was strategic intelligence that could affect corps-level planning. Morrison immediately ordered radio contact with division headquarters while his medics worked on the rescued prisoners. Miller needed immediate evacuation for suspected internal injuries. 2 of his men showed signs of frostbite severe enough to require amputation if not treated quickly. The toll of their captivity became fully visible under proper light. Bruises, malnutrition, the hollow eyes of men who'd expected execution rather than rescue. As stretchers were prepared for evacuation to rear area hospitals, Miller insisted on speaking with Brennan one final time. "The dog," he said, voice rough with exhaustion and emotion. "Rex found us when nobody else could have. Make sure that's in your report. Make sure they know." Brennan promised he would, understanding that Miller needed the story told not for glory, but to ensure the improbable truth was documented before memory faded or details were lost. Rex settled near the aid station, accepting food and water from soldiers who'd heard pieces of the story and wanted to meet the dog that had guided 12 men through German lines. Martinez sat beside him, checking paws for injuries and removing ice balls that had formed between the pads. The dog tolerated the attention, but kept his focus on Brennan, as if the mission wouldn't be truly complete until the intelligence was delivered and confirmed. Division headquarters received Brennan's intelligence report at 2200 hours. Within 30 minutes, staff officers were plotting German corridor positions on operational maps and coordinating with neighboring units to determine the full extent of the network. By midnight, artillery had been repositioned to cover potential breakthrough routes, and reconnaissance assets were tasked with confirming the details Brennan's platoon had risked everything to deliver. The impact became clear within 48 hours. A planned German counterattack that would have exploited the hidden corridors to infiltrate behind American lines was detected and disrupted before it could develop. Artillery fire collapsed key sections of the bunker complex, trapping supplies and forcing enemy units to abandon positions they'd spent weeks fortifying. Intelligence officers estimated that Brennan's discovery prevented casualties that would have numbered in the hundreds if the German operation had proceeded undetected. For the men who'd executed the mission, recognition came in forms both official and personal. Brennan received a Silver Star for leadership under fire. Harker and Martinez earned Bronze Stars for valor. Miller and his surviving patrol members were awarded Purple Hearts, along with commendations for the intelligence they'd gathered before capture. The citations documented actions that military historians would later study as textbook examples of reconnaissance operations conducted under extreme conditions. But the recognition that mattered most to the men involved was simpler and more immediate. Rex was officially designated a war dog and enrolled in the military working dog program, retroactively making his service status legitimate. The paperwork Martinez filed ensured Rex would receive proper veterinary care, rations, and transport for the remainder of the war. More importantly, it guaranteed that when the fighting ended, Rex wouldn't be left behind or euthanized like so many animals the military considered expendable equipment. The dog recovered from his injuries within a week, though he carried permanent scars from the ravine descent. His right foreleg never regained full strength, giving him a slight limp that became his distinguishing characteristic. Martinez adapted handling techniques to accommodate the injury, and Rex adapted his working style, proving that diminished physical capacity didn't equate to reduced effectiveness. They remained together through the final months of the European War, conducting reconnaissance missions that contributed to the steady Allied advance into Germany. Rex's detection abilities saved countless lives, his warnings preventing ambushes and identifying booby traps that would have devastated unsuspecting units. Other handlers began requesting consultations with Martinez, wanting to understand the training methods that produced such remarkable performance. The bond between dog and handler deepened through shared danger and mutual dependence. Martinez learned to read Rex's subtle communications, ear positions, tail movements, breathing patterns, with accuracy that approached telepathy. Rex learned to trust Martinez's judgment about when to advance and when caution was warranted, the partnership evolving beyond handler and animal into something approaching true collaboration between equals. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, the question of Rex's future arose with new urgency. Military regulations regarding war dog disposition remained ambiguous, subject to interpretation by local commanders who might consider dogs expendable now that fighting had ended. Martinez filed adoption papers immediately, supported by testimony from Brennan and every officer who'd witnessed Rex's contributions. The approval came through within a month, making Rex officially Martinez's property, rather than military equipment. They returned to the United States together aboard a transport ship crowded with soldiers eager to resume civilian lives. Rex adapted to shipboard routine with the same competence he'd shown in combat, his presence comforting men who struggled with memories of what they'd witnessed and survived. On deck one evening, as the ship crossed the Atlantic toward home, Martinez found Brennan standing at the rail, watching the sunset paint clouds in shades of orange and red. "Thinking about Miller?" Martinez asked, knowing that the corporal had died from internal injuries 3 days after his rescue, his body too damaged by captivity to recover despite medical intervention. Brennan nodded. "Thinking about all of them, Carson, Williams, the others we lost, wondering if what we did mattered enough to justify the cost." It was the eternal question of combat veterans, the mathematics of sacrifice that never quite balanced no matter how many times you worked the equation. Martinez gestured to Rex, who sat nearby with typical alertness despite being surrounded by friendly soldiers on a ship far from any battlefield. He thinks it mattered. Dogs don't question purpose. They just execute the mission and trust their pack. Maybe we should learn from that. The simplicity of the observation carried weight that philosophical complexity couldn't match. They'd done what soldiers do, followed orders, protected each other, completed the mission despite costs that would echo through nightmares for decades. Whether it mattered in grand historical terms was above their authority to judge. What they knew with certainty was that Rex had led 12 men through impossible terrain to safety, and that sometimes in the chaos of war, survival itself was victory enough. Rex's story became part of military working dog history, studied by handlers and included in training materials that emphasize the importance of trusting animal instincts even when human judgment suggested otherwise. Photographs of him appeared in veteran publications, always showing that slight limp and the torn ear that marked him as authentically combat-tested rather than parade ground perfect. Martinez kept those clippings in a scrapbook that grew thick with memories of a war that felt increasingly distant as years passed. If this account of Rex and the men who trusted him resonated with you, consider sharing it with others who value stories of loyalty and courage in their truest forms. Subscribe to discover more authentic military history that honors both human and animal service members who shaped outcomes through dedication rather than headlines. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts, and remember that sometimes the most important missions are the ones that never made it into official history books, but changed everything for those who were there.